Okay, let's get started. I'm going to do a very brief introduction here. This is an interesting session that's a little bit of a different format to everything we've seen before. This is day 2, session 2. Thank you all for all of those of you who could make it. This is the session about the Carraro Lab, the Inside the Metaverse, Carraro Lab Space Telling. And here to facilitate the session are Gerald Kupczyk and Andrea Carraro. I'm going to introduce Jerry, who I know a little bit, and he is going to take over the entire hosting of the session. So he's going to introduce what their interview has been about, and we'll show you a pre-recorded video that they've constructed for this occasion. And all of you can ask questions during while viewing the presentation, because they're here and they can answer the questions in the chat window, or leave them to the end of the session. So you have their complete attention while they are watching, while you're watching the video. There's also, Roberto is also here, who's part of the setup. Sorry, Roberto, I didn't see you quite there before. And so I'm just going to introduce Jerry first, Gerald Kupczyk, and then he can take it away from there. So thank you all for being here. Professor Kupczyk is enormously generous for doing this, even with my little prodding. So thank you for being here, Jerry, and playing along again this year. It's second year in a row for Jerry. Dr. Kupczyk has been a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto since 1974. He was the president of 3 international organizations, including the International Association for Empirical Aesthetics, the Psychology and the Arts of the American Psychological Association, and the International Society for the Empirical Study of Literature. We align in our focus on the imagination, taking very different perspectives, but we have exceedingly fruitful conversations. And I hope this will be an extension of one of those. So thank you, Jerry, for doing this.
Well, my pleasure. Last summer in August, I had the privilege in early September of visiting with Andrea and Roberto and Roberto's twin brother, Gualtiero, in Palazzolo, which is sort of between Milan and Venice. I'd make the joke that it's sort of like Disney World, except it's real. It's a fantasy land of ice cream and palaces and churches. We discussed, Andrea and I have been working together for more than a year, and we had a lovely interview with Roberto, his dad, and Gualtiero and Roberto's twin brother about the future of the metaverse. Carraro Lab is on the cutting edge in Italy and in Europe of virtual reality and augmented reality in applied settings for all manner of institutions, whether it's religious. Now they have a strong emphasis on the educational. I interviewed with them for 3 hours. Andrea cut it down to about 30 minutes. It's a 360 interview, so you can use a mouse, and Andrea will explain to you how you can actually view it.
So, greetings to all of you. It was supposed to be movable with the mouse, so a 360-degree video that probably you already know. But the limitation of this software probably will not give us the possibility to navigate this video in that manner. So what you will see is going to be a very horizontal video, and it will show you all of the studio with the 4 of us. But we'll see how it goes.
And what we did is we had the long interview, we edited it down to describe the purpose of the Carraro Lab in relationship to where things are at. They are on the cutting edge, so you can watch the video of the interview and ask questions after of Andrea and Roberto, who's the founder of Carraro Lab.
The meaning of taking a 360 video for the interview was that you would experience an immersive interview, but also you could see all of us. And this is not only an aesthetic situation, but also symbolically, it shows you how an immersive space can change from the paradigm of the frame, like for photography or video making, and it gives you a new paradigm that it is the space telling, as we call it, and it's a matter of space. So you have to arrange the space accordingly, and you see the space around us and us in the space.
And then you can ask questions.
Of course. We'll do our best to answer them.
Do you want us to start streaming the video?
Whenever you're ready.
Yes.
Perfect. Amy, please stream the video. Thank you.
Visiting here in the beautiful city of members of the Corraro Lab, Andrea, Roberto, and Gualtiero Corraro. And we're going to talk about the future of the metaverse. And they are the founders and developers of the Corraro Lab, which is at the cutting edge of virtual reality research. We're going to talk about the history of the company. We're going to talk about the goals and ideas of the company and how it interfaces with society in the future. So first, let me introduce Andrea, who's going to give some background to the structure of today's conversation.
One thing, in order to understand the importance of Corraro Lab in the metaverse, is to understand the digital through an artistic point of view. Follow me, if you will. We have examples right here of canvases, but especially of framing of art. You can see that the frames here, we are very familiar with that. It's the quadrangular shape. It is common paintings like this, also of scrolls, but we'll stick with the Western art. But as we see, we find it in books, but also we find it in the least technological devices through which we understand reality. And also we create artistic media and artistic pieces. Take, for example, the iPad. It is quadrangular in itself. And the movies also are made in a quadrangular shape. So all of this storytelling is made through this framing of images and framing of situations. The metaverse will speak in a different language. One time, Corraro Lab was presented by Steve Jobs. During the presentation of the iPad 2, what hit Steve Jobs in that moment was that we used, quoting, a larger canvas. Because, for example, we use the iPad not as a canvas, not as a frame, but as a way to navigate a space. By doing so, we destroyed the paradigm of the canvas and of the quadrangular frame, and we exited somehow from the paradigm of storytelling, and we entered into the space-telling world. In this case scenario, we break a tradition of millennia that saw the quadrangular shape and that created frames, and we start talking in the language of the space. So we need to understand that Corraro Lab, before everyone else, started to talk through the space. The organization of space and the composition that were essential in all the arts before us will be applied in the future, but not through a canvas, not through a frame, but through the composition of objects and through the treatment of space in itself in a meaningful way. This is going to be the most important challenge of the metaverse, and this is the reason why we are doing an interview in a 360 space that was organized to host for people and not to frame for people.
It's interesting the position of Andrea about coming back to Cicero, the Cicero idea of the Palace of Memory. In the Palace of Memory, Cicero said, constat artificiosa memoria ex locis et imaginibus. The virtual memory is based on places and pictures, objects and pictures. The work of the creator of the metaverse is the same like the one of Cicero. Create environment with the picture inside. And Cicero said, imagines agentes, living pictures. Living picture to take your attention and to bring your memory in a powerful way of communicate.
Okay, so in the next phase, Roberto's going to talk about the origins of Carrara Lab in an aesthetic context, the context of meaning, looking to the future.
Thank you. We can speak about the first period of our company. It was an artistic period. We worked for the Biennale of Venice and the Kassel. For example, this painting represents the origin of the digital world. It represents the proliferation of the signifiers. It is the big bang of the digital world coming from data, coming from alphabetical, alphanumerical world, and that slowly go to a graphical and iconic representation that we see there. We work about the language of the icons. The icons were very ancient, before the alphabet, from the original civilization, okay, but they come back in our age with the digital world like a tool to interact. In this period, we studied all the icons, the language of the icons, and how the original representation, like the Chinese representation or the prehistoric human body, can be a tool today to create a universal language to communicate in the digital interfaces. From where we started, and now we are going from this flat world of the 80s, the metaphor of the desktop, toward a three-dimensional world in where we do not use ideograms, but we create, like we said, loci et imagines, places and picture inside. This is the language, artistic language of the metaverse that is ancient, that coming from the past, and we take from different elements of the past. For example, this representation is a palace of memory that came from the Chirico places. That is an Italian artist that represent some metaphysical world. But now the challenge is to create a new art. That is the art of the metaverse. The aim of Carrara Lab from the beginning, in the 80s, was to put together the digital revolution and art. We participate to the Venice Biennale and the Kassel with a contemporary art work about the revolution, the first revolution of digital world. It was the graphic interface and above all the icons. In the beginning, the digital was flat. We have a flat interface, the desktop metaphor, with icons inside. We see here different pictures and paintings about icons and the origin of icons. The icons were the first global digital language. In the icons we can interact, we can share content, and we can use this tool, that is, and we can play with the digital world. We can say that so the desktop metaphor was the first metaverse. Very simple, flat, but it was the way to involve people inside the computer science with the easy way. Tools like a trash, like a pencil, and you can use the digital world. Now, of course, the time is changing and we are going inside a three-dimensional world, digital world, that we call the metaverse. But it's not so new. You see here, for example, some picture from Second Life, or one of the first three-dimensional world not dedicated to the game. And we create something artistic inside it about 20 years ago. So we are ready to the new metaverse because we have already worked on the first metaverses, the first interfaces metaphors, and now we are working to the new interfaces metaphors that are three-dimensional. We are working on the first school of the metaverse, divided now in 12 kind of metaverses that are about a lot of subjects, from industry to art to medicine, and all our world is coming inside a metaverse, but we have to create it in a distinctive way and with attention to be deep, to understand that is an important revolution, and this revolution is on the line of our Western culture, that is based on the realism of the representation, and the virtual reality is the last step of 2000 years of evolution of art, because we can certainly say that art was and is the first metaverse of the man. Where when we create art, when we see art, when we live in a work of art, we are in a metaverse. We can start from a question that is, there will be only one metaverse or many metaverses. From a point of view, we can speak about one metaverse. For example, many big players of the digital industry are working to create one metaverse. And the user experience of this metaphor is imagined like Second Life. We define it the social game metaverse. It is a form of entertainment, not very useful, but we don't know it will be the real metaverse, but now the mainstream of the media hype is about this kind of metaverse. The second universal metaverse is the internet itself. Imagine that now internet is made by pages, pictures, and it is evolving and introducing virtual reality and augmented reality into the internet. This evolution is a change of the whole internet as a unique metaverse that is changing and is becoming three-dimensional. Okay, on this point of view, we can speak about one metaverse. But if we go on with a deeper analysis of what is happening, we can say that there are many kinds of metaverses, and so it depends by the application of the metaverse and the sectors in which we can apply the metaverse concept. For example, we can introduce augmented reality. So the metaverse is not only a place, virtual place in which people that are in different places can meet together and interact, but it's also a place in which, a virtual place among us, that we are in the same physical place. So it is a different approach. And in the next months, there will be launched on the market new kinds of glasses that will be hybrid, both virtual and augmented reality. So the first example of metaverse, Second Life, is already old. And we must think about the metaverse like the future of the internet, but also an augmented reality experience. So we are opening our minds and starting to consider other kinds of metaverses. For example, we can speak about metaverses for education. There are some examples of this. Google made some experiments, but also there are other companies that work on the use of virtual environments as learning objects and learning experiences. But they are not games, they are not social, they are for education and culture. Also, this kind of metaverse is connected with a scientific approach. So, for example, in medicine or also in astronomy, there are some applications that make it for you possible to go into the human body or in the space, like an experience to learn. Okay? It is a serious metaverse. It is a cultural metaverse, not only for entertainment. But if we go in the workplace, we can also discover other kinds of metaverses. For example, the professional metaverses. The office is changing. Of course, after the pandemic era, we are usually in video calls, video meeting, so we are already in a sort of metaverse, but it is video, it is bidimensional. So imagine that you can add to this experience also three-dimensional experiences. You can touch object interfaces, you can share models and mock-ups, you can work together in professional way on a virtual object and in a virtual environment. This is the professional metaverse, but also industry. There are the digital twins. You can create a copy or a factory or a hospital or an airport, and you can use this for controlling, monitoring, but also have a vision of evolution, but also interact and control the industry. So in this kind of metaverses, people are together with machines. And the technology that is applied to this kind of digital twin metaverse is the Internet of Things, because also technologies participate to the meta. You interact with objects and things. Smart cities. Some cities in the world are announcing that they are creating a metaverse. Seoul in Korea, but also Mecca in Saudi Arabia are announcing that they will create the metaversic version of a city to make possible the interaction between citizens and their administration, but also tourists that can visit virtually the city. This is another kind of metaverse. But also we can imagine other application. Imagine medicine. The virtual copy of your body will be in the sanitary metaverse, in which you will have the possibility to create also prostheses of parts of your body, starting from the digital copy of your body. For dental application it is normal now, but it will be applied also to all our bodies. So there will exist a medical metaverse. It is also now ongoing, this application. It's not only the future, partly is really existing. So finally I can make some other examples. Google Maps, the digital map of the world, is a copy of a real world, one-to-one dimension, okay? And in this kind of metaverse, we're already now, when I use the navigator, I meet with other people. I'm not conscious of this, but people help me to understand how is the traffic. We are together in a copy of the world that is a digital map, and this map interacts with us. And we use normally, day by day, this application. And it will evolve, and it will become an immersive experience. And finally, I am finishing my speech. In this kind of metaverse, we can also travel in time. We can go to the past. We made some application of this. So you are in a map, but in this map you can travel in the past of this place. And also you can create a tourist application. You can travel in other places and meet people and interact with them, also to prepare and improve your tourist experience. In all these fields, we have some experiences and jobs that we did. So we are prepared to this, and in our school, we introduce all these kind of applications and prepare people to be ready to enter in different kinds of application of the metaverse in the real and digital world.
In this next phase of our conversation, we're going to talk about virtual reality in terms of the successes of virtual reality, the limitations of virtual reality, and some of the problems associated with virtual reality that have to do with democracy and almost a political aspect. And it'll be more of a conversational style. Gualtiero is going to begin by talking about some of the successes and the limitations of virtual reality work.
Yes, for example, from a medical point of view, we experienced both the good and the bad experiences for virtual reality. It is a virtual reality headset, for example. You can create a super sensorial experience for handicapped people. So, for example, you can make possible for people that can't walk to visit a glacier or a tower. We made it possible, and it was very exciting for people who couldn't move. Okay. Also, we can make a strong educational emotion and improve memory with this technology. But on the other side, it is not possible to use this technology for 2 hours because we have already some neurological and medical problems for eyes, for nervous system. So we are not ready to create a continuous experience with virtual reality. And it is necessary to use it with small moments and phases, and to manage them very carefully, also for kids, for example.
So one thing that we have to understand is that the metaverse, or the 3D spaces in general, are made for the people not only to watch but to enter and to understand. So people, users, must be the center of the operations and especially of the role of the editor. In this case scenario, the book is very easy to use but also to control. A book, you can open it, you can close it with the easiest instruments that we have, the hands, that define us as humans. This is easy, this is framed, this is open, and this is closed. All of these possibilities of controls disappear when you enter into the space, and into a space in general, especially into a space filled with meaning. Me and Gerald, for example, visited Palazzo Te, where there is this incredible room, the Room of Giants, made by Giulio Romano. That is an incredible example, maybe the first example, of a virtual space made as a metaverse without, let's say, framing and control. Because Giulio Romano works on the edges, on the very edges of the room, in order to create an illusion of a sphere space. In this space, you have everything going on. All the people, the giant Zeus, and the river, and the stones are working together, and it seems like they are moving, even if they are solidified into the structural structure of the room. This creates a sense of a fear of confusion. It is an interesting example, also because if you compare it to the Sistine Chapel, which is as rich, even richer, way richer than that room in a matter of dimensions and complexity of iconography, you understand better what you are seeing. You're not filled with fear. Somehow, even if you are made little from the majestic dimension of the Sistine Chapel, you can learn, you can understand what you are seeing, because if you see the Sistine Chapel, you see a different structure and a composition of frames. So the frame disappears, yes, as a frame in itself, but it returns as a useful tool inside the space telling. So the frame becomes also an object, like the book, that you can understand. Why is it important in the case of metaverse? The glasses, for example, the VR glasses, are a very dangerous tool. They can be very important, but also they take an important tool on the health of the person that uses them. Especially, they can be dangerous because they can confuse the person. As a person inside Giulio Romano is confused and cannot understand what the room is about. If we want to talk about education, we need to talk about the frame, not as a frame, but as a way to understand and to convey meaning, as a way to navigate the space and to understand it. Also, as a way of caring about the user, because the user must be dealt with the utmost sensibility, with the utmost delicacy, because the user is in a situation where he is powerless and he needs somehow assistance and guidance in the experience of the space in order to understand it.
We've been talking for the last few days about the future of the internet, the future of virtual reality, but also implicates the present. Some of the blessings, some of the opportunities of art, but some of the dangers as well. And Roberto has a variety of comments that he would like to make about this.
Okay, we can say that today we are in the Web 2 moment. Okay, what is the Web 2? Web 1 was the beginning of the internet, the creation of the World Wide Web, with a lot of websites of everyone. Okay, in the Web 2 we saw that big companies take the control of the web, like Facebook, like Google, like Amazon, like Apple, take part of the web and create the platforms of the Web 2. The situation is not so good because we have, above all, a cultural problem inside the web. We have the control of people, we have control of political trends, economical trends, psychological trends, and we can say that the actual situation is not so good for the world today. I think that the evolution to the Web 3, to the metaverse age, is an opportunity to change this situation. It is a private internet, business-oriented. I think that the opportunity is to create a web not controlled by the big platform, but created by the society, by everyone, like the Web 1, to come back to everyone has its metaverse, create his metaverse, to enhance creativity of everyone, to create a property of the web, and a new version free of the web, specialized and distinctive for every profession, for every culture. Not only one platform that trend to the fake news. But I think that the actual metaverse of this platform, like Facebook Meta, is on the worst trend. Is a three-dimensional Facebook that is full of fake people in fake words. So I think that it's better to think the metaverse different, to make thousands, millions of metaverses created by everyone. But we need the tools and the culture to create this new art. That is the art of this century, and this art has to be free, to be more creative and more deep. We need to base a new culture, digital culture, on a free, creative, deep metaverse that is not controlled by the big platform.
In this final phase of the conversation, we're going to tie up some loose ends and also talk about some opportunities and some new directions in which things are going. In my listening to Roberto talking about the dangers of the internet, one of the concerns that I have is a loss of privacy, because everything that we put out there in the internet, in the different platforms, is being tracked and then is being used, so to speak, potentially to manipulate us. So I would like to hear his response to that.
The problem of the control of people and the management of the data is one of the big problem of Web 2. It is the web of the private platforms. If we create a metaverse with the same approach, it's worse than now. So we have to change this approach. We have to stop to give the control of the web to this big monopoly and to big platform, and create a more free and more creative approach to this new web that has to be to all, to everybody. It has to be a creation from the bottom to the up, from the society, an evolution of society, not a social network controlled by one person like now.
So now in a more playful phase of our conversation, we're going to talk almost from an anthropological view about the different ways that the internet and virtual reality can permit ourselves to express ourselves in a creative way. And I'll talk to Gualtiero about this.
Yes, Metaverse has a theatrical approach. Starting from the point of view that you are an actor with a mask. And you put a mask on your body that is the avatar. The avatar is what represents you in the metaverse. In social media, normally you have your real face and your face, Facebook, okay? And in the metaverse, you can choose an avatar. And it has a lot of aspects and consequences. One of them is, but you are real or you are fake. you must choose. You must, in the metaverse, you are really your real aspect, you are male, female, and old, young. In which way do you want to be present in the metaverse? You can change. And it is not a very simple aspect to manage, because there are many psychological aspects. In all the communities and tribes on the anthropological point of view, there is the carnival. The carnival is one day in the year you can change your face and your mask and become another person. But the Romans said, semel in anno licet insanire. You can be mad one day in the year, but not all the year. In the metaverse, you risk to be mad all the year. Okay, this is a consequence possible. So we have to think about this and manage this language and opportunity.
Okay, I saw there were many, many questions on the chat that made me really happy. It's clearly an important subject for the people that are present today. So I promised you a video, for example, to show you how it was meant to be seen. And actually, I can already send you a link on YouTube about the educational field. So this video that I'm sending to you, it's going to be a normal video. It's a video presentation that we send to Italian schools that we translated for this call. So I'll send it to you right now. You can see it in the chat. It's a YouTube link. But if I can share the screen, I could show you an example of the 360 experience via PC. So I am trying to, let's see if it lets me. Do you guys see what I'm showing you?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So for example, the video was meant to be seen like this. So you were in the middle of us talking. So it was up to you to see, for example, me while I was talking, or to watch Gerald, or to watch Gualtiero or Roberto. And what I wanted to stress with this kind of visualization is that you don't use the frame. You don't use for example, the singular frame. Usually it is the one you use in the interview, but you as a viewer are free to roam, to watch around, okay? And me as an interviewer, and an interviewed person, it's up to me to use the surroundings in a meaningful way. So you notice that I stood up and I went actually here, where I'm talking right now, to show you the frame. So, for example, a good practice, if you want to create a meaningful immersive space, is to use the elements inside the space in order to make it more dynamic. So I stood up, I crossed your point of view, and you would probably follow me or not, it's up to you. And I wanted to show you inside the space elements that were meaningful for me and for my discourse. So that is, for example, a way. But as the Italians say, bando alle ciance, which means let's stop talking about little things. It's a medieval way of saying. And let me show you an example of an institutional metaverse. So we talked about the possibility of developing many metaverses, not just one metaverse. I strongly believe that someone that speak talking about the metaverse as a unique, just one metaverse, it means that has a precise political agenda that is about domination. So that is clear for me. We work with many customers that are private and public, okay? And this case scenario, we created a tourist metaverse. How does it work? It's very simple. So we made many 360 photos. As you can see, I can roam around with my mouse, but I can see this application on the smartphone as well. In the case of the smartphone, I would see it like this, and I would use my finger in order to go around. Or I could see it with glasses. If I wear the glasses, I would use my face as the main instrument in order to roam the space. And I would use just my sight as an instrument. So I would stare to one of the signifiers, to one of these symbols that you can see. And these symbols would activate and bring me to another space. For example, this metaverse is the touristic portal of the island of Procida, which is an island next to Naples. Naples is here, you can see it. And how does it work? Mainly, you can go around, you can roam around and see the 360 gigapixel pictures that we made with drones. So you can see all of the island in its entirety, and you actually can find out where are the places, which are the road. But this is already possible via Street View, via the Google application in a less precise but complete way. So what does this platform? What is this platform useful for? For example, you can go on the ground, and you can see a place you roam around, and in each place you can see the events that are going to take place. So the data, the date in which is going to take place, some informations, but also you can see some places, you can see the churches, you can review all of your travels in advance. And if you're not sure what to do, and that is why it is a metaverse, not only it is an immersive expression of the web, of the internet, but it is also connected, because if you want, you can call an operator that instead of responding via smartphone, it responds you in the site. It takes, he or her or she takes control of what you see, and it guides you inside the island. So for example, you ask, I don't know, I would like to see, for example, I would like to see a beach, but I would like to be alone. So it'll bring you to a certain beach. Or I would like to go where the Movida is, where the people are. I would like to meet people. So it brings you to a certain beach. But for example, it can give you also some information about the past of the island. This is a reconstruction of the Mycenaean period. So I return to my, or for example, you can see a view of how the island looked like. So when you come here, for example, to take a bath, you know that it used to be a natural port for the Mycenaeans, and it gives the tourist a lot of knowledge. So we think that the metaverse should be a way to acknowledge people, to give them more knowledge in an immersive and interesting and fun way. It is more fun than just reading it through the book. I love history, but not all of us share my passion. But you know, coming to this place, for example, and take a bath here, it's different if you know the history behind it, if you know that it used to be a little village and it used to be a port. So metaverse can do this and more. It can be a mean of domination, a monopoly of a certain person, okay? Let's put it this way. But it can be also a creative tool for many people, okay? So it can develop user-generated content. It can create a more creative field, and it can be also institutional, can be free, it can be private, can be many things. So I'll just stop the sharing of the video, and I'll let you ask me whatever you like.
I think there's a question in the chat from Anthony Sago. With the progression of AI being able to pass as human online, how do you think that will affect the VR space? Someone could give the, I suppose they mean GPT model, an online avatar, and it could be used for many positive and negative things, and might be very hard to verify if it was a real human or not. So what are your thoughts there?
Absolutely, absolutely. We are scared about this. I'll be very honest. That is why we like to think the metaverse in an institutional way. Why? Because as Europeans, we live under the European state of law. So a lot of, as you probably know, Europe is very careful about privacy, it tries to be very careful about privacy. You know that it sued many big companies that were never been sued before because of privacy. And it is a concern because it is very dangerous. Yes, AI can generate, and I believe will generate people, let's call it this way, avatars, okay, that will be able to probably they will be able to act as humans and to react as humans. And this is a dangerous thing that will be surely addressed by governments. I believe that the new phase of the internet, the immersive phase, will also be a phase where institution will take a more active role in governing the situation, because it can be very, very dangerous in this case scenario. We, for example, we believe in real people in real worlds. So even if we are in a virtual world, we'll have, in my opinion, the necessity to show, for example, an ID. Probably there will be an ID that you will have to show, and I don't know what dimension it will take, how aesthetically it's going to be seen, how it's going to work, but it must be. There are going to be metaverses just for fun and for entertaining, where probably this kind of recognizability will not going to be necessary. But if we are going to talk about metaverses of government institution, of public institution, of schools, for example, you'll have to have a way to identify yourself. And for example, the metaverse that we are creating for schools, I sent you the link via YouTube, is going to be closed. It's going to be open for the people inside it, but it was going to be very easily identified, every people inside it. Schools and teachers will be able to see who did what. So it's going to be very, very controlled, very safe. We are talking about safety here, more than control. So on one side, in my opinion, I am openly critical. You see a big company that advises for one metaverse, where actually there is this, in my opinion, ambiguous freedom, okay? Ambiguous freedom, where it seems like no one has to be recognizable, and I believe it's not very, it's not going to be very easy to have something like that in public institution and places where people have to be protected and safe. So you have one metaverse, that is that metaverse, and you have many other metaverses. In my opinion, in those metaverses, there are going to be programs that will recognize AI generated avatars, and there is going to be many other ways to recognize each other in real life. But this is only speculations, because we are in a very in the very first steps. So I can't speak about precise events and data. I can only speculate, but this is my opinion.
There's another question there. Jerry, do you want to read out from Jan Scheidstiger? And perhaps, oh, Nicholas is also, there are some links being posted in the chat. Maybe one last, so you have like 2 minutes left. Do you want to have some final words, Jerry, or how you want to summarize things here?
I have to say that I'm very pleased looking at the interview, because they spoke for 3 hours. Mm-hmm. And here you have a company that's very concerned with democracy, with preserving privacy, with cultural value in many different domains. So I was very lucky to have this experience, and I'm very pleased with what the interview looked like in the end, because we saw the diversity of the implications of virtual reality work. The culturally responsible company working even with the Vatican, even with different domains. And I think one of the lessons here is we want to make sure that as we move ahead in the world of virtual reality and augmented reality, that we look to corporate responsibility and get a sense for the extent to which our privacy is being preserved. But I give the last word to Andrea, since he was my host.
I quickly seen the comments. So, for example, remember that for the Web 3D, okay, the Web 3D, it's not working on hardware devices that are owned by the people, but they are working on the public or private devices that are the infrastructure of the web. And it's not ready yet. It's not ready yet for this kind of amount of models and of complexity. So the thing is that, for example, we had to create way more simple 3D models without any kind of particle effects or everything else, because otherwise people wouldn't able to see them, because not all the people have the latest devices, and also because they wait on the transatlantic incredible infrastructure that makes the web possible. For example, one thing that you have to keep in mind if you want to operate in Web 3D is that right now you have to exemplify the 3D models as much as you can if you want it to work. So that was a little shock for us because we had to, but this could change quickly. And I believe it's going to change quickly. Without this kind of change, metaverse will not be able to exist, in my opinion, in the way we want it to be useful.
We have to unfortunately draw this to a close now, but Andrea, I will send you and Gerald and the Corrado Lab generally the entire chat window so that you can see what kinds of questions were there. We'll send it to you separately. Thank you so much, all of you, for it's an enormously engaging lecture presentation, and the chat window was on fire. So thank you all for throwing so many questions at Andrea, so many that we couldn't answer them. Thank you, Jerry, for your generosity in allowing this to be part of the festival. And let's go to the next session then. Starts at 12 o'clock. It'll start at 12:01. Thank you all so much for being here.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. You're very polite.
Bye.